All right, so hopefully the stream is live. Looks like it is. So
Just came up.
Awesome. Perfect. So I've got the telescope set up outside in the driveway. It's a 8-inch Newtonian with an ASI294 camera running SharpCap, and it's connected to a little mini PC, has its own router, and I can remote desktop into it. So this screen right here is the remote desktop for the computer out there. You can see the little blue icon there. So right now I have the camera taking 4-second exposures at M51, and you can just see it here. These are the individual frames stretched. This is sort of how the frame looks coming from the camera. But with a little boost, we can definitely tell that we're on target. So I've got my flat frame already taken for the night, and I'm going to apply a dark frame. I'm going to use 8-second exposures. And I'll bump up the exposure to 8 seconds. Disable this stretch here, or else it'll get kind of double stretched, which gets ugly real fast. So hopefully we should start live stacking those individual short frames. So as you can see, the noise will slowly start to smooth out and get, less and less colorful, or I call it clown vomit when it's really early and really bright. But you can stretch the histogram on the fly down here, adjusting the black point, which kind of remaps the data that the camera's collecting. So this is the new 0, the new black. So you can see if we slide this past all the stuff that we have collected, we basically clip everything. So this is really useful for cutting out the sky glow. So you can see, we're in pretty murky sort of Bortel 5 skies. But with this, if we very carefully place it right kind of where the peak begins, this is all preference. Some people like darker skies. I usually like to have a little bit of sky brightness left. So you can slide the black point here, and then the really great control is the midpoint, the gray. So with this, you can kind of remap the midtones and boost the low level grays, which will really help to pull out the sort of very faint areas of the galaxies. So you can see the sort of EAA live stacking is really quick. Just in the 100 seconds or so that I've been talking, this is starting to smooth out. You can definitely see it's kind of purple, so we can also try to color balance it here. So there's an automatic color balance down here, and then you can make minor adjustments. So this maybe looks a little bit red. Usually I look at kind of the sky and just eyeball it. I wish there was some good sort of neutral gray reference in the user interface. But you can also check the histogram down here and look at all the peaks to make sure that the peaks are all pretty close to each other, generally. If you're looking at a big hydrogen alpha area where there's a lot of red, you'll expect that red peak to be a little bit to the right.
Sometimes I use the stars, but sometimes that's hard for the color balance because they're completely saturated usually.
Yeah, so sometimes I'm not sure how much of a problem the lack of an infrared cut filter in this camera, because sometimes the stars, like I'll get my sky where I want it, where I'm happy, and then I'll look at some of the stars and they're like purple and green. I'm like, I don't think there's purple or green stars out there. So something's not right. So it's usually I just kind of poke and prod by preference, and sometimes I get good color stars and sometimes not.
Well, does the infrared start entering into the blue bins, or?
I think so. If you looked at sort of the spectral response beyond the infrared, some of the blue and green starts to pick up color, so you get really wonky colors of something that's very heavily infrared. It's kind of like taking a picture of a fire with a cell phone. Sometimes the coals come out purple.
Yeah, I had seen some funny. I mean, even just the way our eye sees purple is kind of the opposite of that, right? That's going violet becomes double the wavelength of red, and then we start pulling in blue and red to make the purple violet colors we see. So I guess it's similar.
There's a really cool Stephen Mould video on YouTube. He does like interesting science videos on sort of phenomena and neat things. I think he did a video on purple. That was really cool. I'm trying to pull up the spectral.
That was really cool.
Yeah, okay. Your brain kind of fakes it. So I'm trying to pull up a spectral response for the camera. I can't drag it onto the remote desktop. The one that I found, it looks like they clip it at 700 nanometers, which is usually the, actually I can probably briefly, briefly minimize this. So you can see this is the truncated spectral response. Usually this is about where an infrared cut would start working, but you can see the green peak starts to come back in sensitivity as the red is descending. So as you get into infrared, the colors get a little funky. Some stars have a lot of infrared.
Yeah, so which camera are you using on this?
This is the ASI294. So it's
294.
It has pretty...
I thought they had some amount of infrared. Most of the RGB ones had some.
Yeah. I think the sensitivity into the infrared is pretty good. It's just that some of the other pixels start to pick it up beyond, you know, green and maybe blue, I forget. Sometimes, maybe from Sony, you can get the full spectral response where you can start to see the weirdness that happens into the infrared. So for normal consumer cameras, they might cut that. But usually it's not too big of a problem. I've been curious to try maybe doing an infrared cut to see if that would help make things a little easier to color balance or make the stars look more natural. Although usually I find they can get pretty good. Like this one seems kind of blue. I don't see any wonky ones, but I'm sure at some point tonight we'll see some purple or green stars with bad color balance. If you look, that looks like maybe a satellite track there, very faint. So tonight I'm using a sigma clipping stacking algorithm. So instead of just normally averaging every new frame onto the stack with this, where is it? Under stacking, you can set the algorithm to sigma clipping. So it'll essentially take an average value for each pixel. And then if a new pixel from a new picture deviates from that average, say a plane trailing through or a satellite streaking over, it'll just reject it. It won't add it and average it to the stack. So it can kind of cope with some satellite tracks. The only problem is because this is live on the fly, it's all happening up front. So usually in post-processing you have all of your pictures and you can get a really good average and really good error rejection. Whereas this, you have to build an initial average at which point you're a little bit vulnerable to stuff coming in, because if you get a plane streaking across while you're building that initial average, then it kind of throws everything off. So I'm still playing around with the settings.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like we got a little bit of the very faint tidal sort of material flung off into space. Let's see if we can play with the histogram and accentuate it. So another thing that's kind of fun about EAA is you're not always there for the best looking picture. So, for example, if I want to try and observe this very faint area there, I can kind of brutally mangle the picture and just focus on that one spot and try to clip it just enough to get some more contrast and to see that area right here. So you can definitely see that it kind of extends out to these two stars there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can start to see the, when you do extreme stretching like this, that's when any flaws or noise or fixed pattern noise or flat frame issues start to show up. So you can see, even though I'm using a flat frame, I've got some non-uniformity showing up, but this is a pretty extreme stretch. And you can see kind of a grainy, splotchy fixed pattern noise. Now I think under normal astrophotography you could do dithering, and that would kind of smooth out that granularity. And I think SharpCap has the ability to do that. You can link it up with PhD2, and you can tell it to do dithering, and it'll automatically pause the live stack when it dithers and jiggles the scope around, waits for it to settle, and resumes. But usually if I'm looking for something really, really faint where this fixed pattern noise becomes a problem, I'll usually just manually dither by pausing the stack.
And yeah, I'm having fixed noise problems in my solar photography. Places where the sun might be defocused, where there's not, you can't, or it doesn't have a large amount of variation in the surface, that causes the pattern to show up in the stacked image.
The
problem is you can't really dither that because you're dealing with frames that are taken back to back at an incredibly high rate.
Yeah, there's going to be a blur somewhere in there if you try. So I've just nudged it by 2 arc seconds, and I've given it some time to settle. So I'll hit resume, and if I look at the drift graph down here, this sort of shows the results of SharpCap stacking the stars, and you can see my mount isn't fantastic. I've got 22 pixels in the time that we've been stacking for about 10 minutes. You can see it sort of oscillates, and now down here, those blue points down here are the new ones, and that's the 2 arc seconds that I just manually shifted it, so you can see the sort of drift, or the amount that SharpCap is compensating each new frame. So that kind of helps a little bit. And because my mount isn't perfect and it really kind of slops side to side with periodic error, that's kind of almost dithering, natural dithering. So I usually end up getting streaks. So instead of like a completely homogeneous splotchiness, I'll have sort of horizontally elongated splotchiness due to my periodic error in the right ascension, sort of stretching out those patterns left to right. So usually I'll just bump it north and south a little bit. So I'm going to tone down the histogram stretch. And you can also adjust saturation and stuff. But usually I find with really high saturation, it kind of exacerbates any noise issues. So if I crank it again, you can really start to see the kind of nasty pixelated color. So you could always just accumulate a lot of data and wait a long time, a longer live stack, it'll start to smooth out on its own. But usually I kind of...
And this guy doesn't actually have all those fun colors and variation in it.
There's a party going on up there. And then within SharpCap, you can also save little snapshots. So I can label it up here. You know, this is a pretty iconic galaxy, but when you get into the weird, obscure NGC and PCG stuff, it's helpful to have a label of what it was I was looking at. So I can add a target name there, and then you have a bunch of different options for saving. You can save a FITS file in sort of 16-bit and 32-bit, or you can save just a simple PNG of exactly what is shown here with the histogram stretch applied and the color balance applied, which is usually what I do. I don't usually mess with the files after I take them. But if
you could spend pretty much an infinite amount of time working on that.
Yeah, and there's another setting to save all of the individual frames. So if you wanted to do a traditional astrophotography post-processing workflow, you could, because this will only spit out a single FITS image, and if you have a satellite streak across, it'll be there. But if you export out all the individual frames, you can then project those satellite frames or do the sigma clipping. But it would be a lot of disk space, because I think each picture is about, I don't know, 16 megabytes or something. And when you're doing short exposure live stacking like this, you've already got 103 pictures for this one object, and then within a night I'll probably do a dozen objects, so it adds up pretty quick. So that's another reason I kind of like the live stacking, is you get kind of a fairly condensed data at a price. You don't have the flexibility of going back and fixing stuff. I think maybe the sky is a little green. I'll try to. Now it's kind of reddish purple. There you go. It's kind of decent for me. So I'll save this and I'll look for a new target. I saw this month's Sky and Telescope had a pretty big article on M101 and all the galaxies around there. I was thinking it might be nice to poke around and see.
Oh yeah, I had a good laugh. I tried to do M101 last night. That was funny. It was just so
Visually?
impossible to see in the sky glow.
Oh, yeah. Where you have a big city to the north?
I'm in Arlington, so it's
all New Hampshire stuff.
Even from the clubhouse, it's hard to see visually.
Yeah, it's very low surface brightness. You can see that this is
It's also so freaking huge.
It's spread out.
It is, yeah.
If you have too much magnification, you can't sort of see it because it
was
fills.
so cool with those vision goggles, just to be able to look up and see it. That got still in my head.
Yeah. Yeah, at Slav at the
I didn't
clubhouse.
realize how big it is.
Yeah, I did the June challenge last night, and until I brought it up to pretty high power, it was really hard to see. It's really kind of amusing just how different it is in light polluted skies to be cranking the power up to see something faint rather than using low power to see something faint.
What's the June object? Is it M85 or was that the previous month?
No, the June object is NGC 5689.
I'll give it it's on our side of the meridian. We could give it a shot after this. There were a couple galaxies around M101 and I wanted to see. They looked kind of irregular-ish. Thought it might be neat. So usually my preference for the histogram is kind of to include some of the sky glow. I find there's usually a lot of subtlety gets lost when it's aggressively clipped, or it makes the
noise.
I'm
of a similar opinion.
A lot, kind of makes the noise.
I mind
really
having a little bit of black
granular.
noise.
Yeah. especially for areas that are really murky, with sort of emission nebula swirled with dark nebula. I find that the dark nebula lose a lot when the black point is clipped, because then they just become a black hole instead of volumetric with, you know, dark areas and darker areas and sort of knots. Last night I was poking around Cygnus. It was a lot of fun. That looks a little green. You know, that's red. I'll keep it for now. Yeah, you can definitely see the sort of star forming regions. I think I'm gonna grab my magazine. I think I called them out for their numbers. Oops. Oops. Tangled up in cords, trying to get the headphones. There we go, back. Looks like some background galaxies there too. I see in Corrected to see.
M101 was more of a glowing area rather than anything that really looked like anything last night. So
yeah, I can imagine it'd be difficult. Just because it's so large, you want low mag, but then the sky brightness kind of blows it out. And you can't really filter for it. I wonder if that would be a use case for smaller aperture. That way you can get
no, tried
wider...
that too. I had both a 4-inch and the 10-inch out.
It's the use case for gasoline.
What?
Put it in the car and then take the telescope to a mountain.
I thought it was on fire.
Oh yeah, I wanted to check if this little galaxy would show up in Cartesial. PCG 49919. I wish it had distances, but the information in Cartesial is pretty sparse. This is magnitude 14.8. Were you able to see some of the brighter knots, or is it just a uniform kind of glow haze when you're looking for it? Like if you went off one of these stars, although I suppose that's a lot darker than the nucleus.
Yeah, I don't even really recall seeing a lot of those stars in the scope. The brighter ones to the left and right, yeah, but
at least they're there to sort of corral. And if there's a patch between these, something to scan back and forth. I'll give the...
I think in my 10-inch scope in the sky here, end up probably magnitude 12, become inverted vision for stars. Anything lower than that is outright gone, unless you go to high power, and even then it's
tiny, sort of in and out.
Yeah. The seeing was really good last night, so things tended not to wink.
Nice. It's always hard for me to tell if I just have bad focus or if it's the seeing, but last night seemed pretty good as far as crispness. Wow, what is that? It's very blue.
Oh, wow, that's pretty.
NGC 5471. Nice. Might give the June object a shot.
So what was the June object? A small galaxy?
I think so. Go here. Looks like almost edge on. Sort of very oblique angle.
Yeah, it's pretty
Oh yeah.
elongated there.
So this is the oh, it's already done. But this is a little finder scope that I have, sort of an E finder. I think it gives like a 30 or 40 degree field of view. So it helps kind of reconnect with this remote scope out there. So with this you can see the handle of the Big Dipper, and here comes a satellite or a plane. Probably a satellite. But I like having this sort of E finder. Especially when I do big moves, you can see if it's going to end up in a tree or looking at a house or roof or something. So I can see a little bit of glow there. I changed it to 2-second exposures just for the move, so it had a quicker update. So now I'll switch it back to 8. And you can stretch the single incoming frames, which is kind of fun. Sometimes, even just 2 seconds stretched, having sort of this semi-live view that updates pretty quickly. You can detect that something's there. It's nice for framing. It's just a potential pitfall for SharpCap is you definitely don't want to leave this histogram stretches what is displayed. So if you're stretching the histogram in the live stack, it'll re-stretch that and it gets ugly fast. So I usually always end up forgetting to do it and then wondering why it looks like a flashbang went off. But I think I'll nudge the scope and sort of try and center this a little bit. So I've got my mount running through ASCOM's POTH. It gives a little kind of virtual handpad, and you can select distances, and then you can kind of move it incrementally. So I think I want the scope to point south. It's usually a guessing game. I guessed right. So now now that I have it where I want it, I'll bump up the exposure to about 8 seconds. And on purpose, I won't reset this, and we'll just see how horrible it looks. So this is the old M101 loaded in memory with its stretch, and then the second stretch on. So we'll clear that out of the live stack memory, so it'll start to accumulate new frames of the new object. And there's a little progress bar down here that shows the individual sub-exposures coming in and how far along they are. And you can see, I mean, the stretching it twice doesn't help, but you can see how sort of grainy and noisy it is. So I'll stop that, the double stretch. And it looks like the mount wasn't quite settled when I started. You can see this kind of a double image of the stars. So I'm going to clear that and start again. That looks better.
Definitely didn't see those other galaxies in it.
Yeah, those ones look really low surface brightness, kind of not even concentrated, just little smudges.
Yeah, wow, there it is. It's always amazing how fast you get an image.
Yeah, it's like you can very quickly detect that something's there and see that something's there, and it just kind of improves as long as you're willing to look at it, which is nice. And it looks like there might be something out here, even fainter. I'm gonna boost it just for the sake of trying to see if there's something there. We can always check Cartesial. So I think it's this one, UGC 9426. Mag 16.5. Mag 25.1 surface. I don't know what the units of that surface brightness is, if it's magnitude per square arc second or something. That's really faint. That's like threshold for my equipment. You can just tell it's there, but it's really in the noise. Not sure if I can see any kind of structure on this one. Maybe vaguely propeller shaped, sort of with this bottom edge brighter than the top edge, and then this top edge brighter than the bottom edge. Not sure if that's just imagination. I can see some kind of splotchiness in this one, where it's not quite uniform. It looks like there's two nuclei, I guess. But I've really been enjoying the new camera. It's really nice to have the really wide field of view and to be able to zoom in on little bits of it. previously the 224 was maybe kind of the central half of it, which is fine. I mean, most objects fit within that. It's only the really sort of the biggest galaxies and the big giant nebula and open clusters. But mostly I've found it just helps locating things and doing the alignment. That was sort of some quality of life improvements I wasn't anticipating with the bigger camera. It made it a lot easier to do the alignment, because I do the alignment through the camera. I would like to get plate solving working, but my on-step mount doesn't want to talk with SharpCap, and I've got some software stuff to work out there, so I do it sort of manually. So with SharpCap, I just turn on some crosshairs, and then using the phone as a handpad, I center up the stars for alignment. But having the wide field of view really helps me speed that up. Previously, it was kind of like a guessing game. But having the finder scope, so previously with my narrower field of view, I'd use this to get the star in the field of view, which helped a lot. But now, as long as I do a good polar alignment, when I do my star alignment, the stars almost land in the field of view, which is nice. They'll be, you know, way over here, but I can still adjust. I could probably bring the black point up a little bit. It looks like a pretty rich area of sky. A lot of little galaxies scattered in there.
I need to work on some way of getting a base thing onto the telescope rings to mount my Raspberry Pi and the other controllers for the setup I'm working on. I still haven't made a whole lot of progress yet.
Nice. Are you running like a Linux indie system or the ASI live sort of thing?
It's the indie. I mean, the ASI stuff is basically all just indie anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I'm playing with I forget which. There's two different projects. I think Raspberry Pi. I think I'm working. I don't remember.
Nice. Is that like a base image that has most of the stuff?
Yeah, it's a base image which pretty much has all the INDI tools already installed and the K-stars and all that.
K-stars looks really nice. I wish it worked on the Windows, or I wish there was live stacking on Linux so that I could try Linux for this. Because the K-star seems really cool as an all-in-one tool, all of it combined in there. And the Onstep'ed project is very tightly integrated with Indy. They have a really good Indy driver where you can access all of the features, so you can run the initial startup alignment through Indy. So you could set it up to sort of start the mount, sync time and date, and then just blind fire into an area of the sky, plate solve, use that as an align point, and then just, you know, blind fire 6 directions and then have a perfect alignment, which would be pretty sick and save a ton of time. I want to try for M97. Not sure if it'll be in a tree. I've got pretty bad horizons. We'll see.
Looks like you have a request for M13.
Sure. That's yeah, we can do that. Yeah, it's in a tree. So that's I really like having this wide field. It saves me the time from looking at SharpCap going, oh, what's going on here? Something's not right. I should have stars, but I don't. You can see cars and stuff go by. All right, let's see. Check out M13. So it should do its own meridian flip. So far I've been pretty lucky. I sort of carefully lay the cables out. Basically what I do is I have my cable bundle that goes to the telescope, and I have it kind of zip tied to the dovetail bar so that that cable bundle exits to the rear of the telescope. And I find that that usually doesn't snag on anything for me. My mount doesn't have too many knobs to snag on, so I've been pretty lucky to be able to just let it do its own meridian flips out there. So far I've never had a problem. But that landed dead center perfect. You can see these are still 8-second exposures, so you saw the funny star shapes. Just as it kind of settles down, it'll vibrate a little bit. So it looks like it's nice and sharp. So we'll... Actually, I want to try... Every now and then I like to turn it down to 2 seconds and then just do the auto stretch. Because I'd like to try to do some kind of outreach at some point. Run like this instead of doing the live stacking, where it's almost like a digital scope where you can sort of really just
a live
fling
view
it
rather than a
around.
live stack.
Yeah, I think it'll help people connect. You know, I can put my hand in front of it and it'll go dark without having to explain the stacking process. And
Yeah, that can really make a difference.
I think where is it? The new ASI Studio. They have, so software direct from ZWO, they have live stacking in the works. And I think that one would be a better fit. It's not as overwhelming with all these, you know, tabs and expanding things and buttons and knobs and dials. It's a pretty slick user interface, and it's better integrated with the camera and has pretty decent color balancing, and even has some basic noise reduction, which I haven't really played with. Actually, we could try it. I'm kind of curious. I won't have a flat frame to use. So I've just disconnected the camera from SharpCap, and now I'll fire up the ASI Studio. Has a really nice user interface, and I think it's cross-platform. I think it runs on, I think I know it runs on Mac, but if it runs on Linux, I should probably try it out, because that would be a live stacking for Linux. I'm not sure if it does, though. So here I can connect to the camera, and you can set the exposures, and I think I should be able to select dark. And last night I took some, I just got to remember where I stuck them. So it's pretty similar, but it has a really sort of simplified user interface, and I think there's a full screen where all that other stuff sort of fades away. So I think something like this could be nice for outreach, a very clean user interface. And then I think the buttons are, yeah, off the side, so it'd be pretty friendly with a touch tablet.
A little bit cleaner.
Yeah, just less like visual noise or overload. But it should, I think this does most of the stuff. I wonder if I accidentally did all my darks at bin 2. Yep. Oops. Well, the noise should fade faster. But you can see some sort of slight color differences where you've got some of the, I believe, the blue stragglers showing up. And I think there's a way to color balance. I'm not super familiar with this software. This is actually the first time I've used it live stacking. Which shows how, reasonably easy it is to pick up and play with. And then it has very similar histogram controls where you can grab the black point and start to clip sort of the sky. And I find having the gray point sort of pushed up here tends to wash out the stars, so you start to lose that subtle color variation in the dimmer stars. Looks a little chunky, but I'm at bin 2.
Yeah. Globular clusters, it's always, for me, sometimes the photographs make them, because you only get the stars as pinpoints rather than kind of having some of the glow. Sometimes I find visually in the scopes they look more interesting. Only in certain aperture ranges. I looked at M13 last night in 4-inch, and it was mostly a ball with a little bit of star speckling. 10-inch, you get some beautiful layer of speckles from the brighter stars on top of the glow. Kind of interesting patterns. And as you go bigger, you get more and more of that. Then when you get to the point where you're taking a picture, you get pure stars and none of the real background fuzz. So you
bump this up to, usually I use 8 seconds, but I think I'll stick with 4 just so I don't blow out the stars too badly. Hopefully I'll be able to get some of the dimmer members. Oof. Oh, did it. Told you I'd do it on accident. So I've got 2 stretches applied. So I want to stop that little display stretch there. Seeing a bunch of hot pixels, I probably chose the wrong dark frame. Let me clear the stack just to see. Maybe I messed up that dark frame, who knows? Or thermal 0. So the camera's a little warm because I think switching the applications, I don't think I turned the cooling on in the ASI Studio. So the entire time I was playing with that, the camera was warming up. So once the camera temperature comes down to 0, then it should match the dark frame. And a lot of these little warm pixels, the green, red, and blue stuff should disappear. And now I'm back at bin 1, so this is the camera's full resolution. But I just love the color variation in the stars. Ignore the confetti.
It's very pretty.
I get a lot of that in my Canon T1i and a lot of the random reds.
Yeah. I think there are some algorithms that can help detect it. and remove it. Just because it's not a natural occurrence to have, you know, pure value in red, green, or blue, so it kind of looks for that stuff and suppresses it. But I'm not too knowledgeable on the traditional processing. I found for the globular clusters, playing with the gray point was a lot of fun. You know, you can really pull out the faintest members, but you blow out the core and lose that nice color subtlety. Or you can sort of shift it way over here. You can get a lot more sort of the brighter members, and you can see the colors in there.
More HDR range on our monitors.
Yeah, yeah. I recently got a was it a 10-bit or a 12, an HDR monitor. I forget the nomenclature. It's like 10-bit plus
10-bit
2
is what they usually use,
or something, with the 2 fake bits where they sort of multiplex between 2 values.
I think it's usually 10-bit done by using an 8-bit with
that's probably
multiplexed.
But it doesn't play nice with all the stuff. So you can turn on HDR within Windows.
To be specially designed for it.
Yeah. So when it encounters a standard dynamic range, it just sort of scales the output. So you end up with kind of muted contrast, because it's just displaying a narrower section of its full, the display is full dynamic range.
Yeah, I've got a HDR monitor and I've used Windows 10 with it, and have gaming rig that uses it, and anything that's not doesn't support the HDR looks clearly different from the stuff that does.
Yeah.
I have with the monitors is they don't have enough dimming zones to. I guess you would need OLED for astrophotography to have good
I would
range.
love to see astrophotography on an OLED screen. I feel like that's like the perfect use case for it. Just the blackest, velvety dark blacks with just searing bright stars on it, pinpoint, with vivid colors. That'd be so cool. Except they're like $5,000. Oh, I've got a neighbor down here. Let's see. So since I meridian flipped, the camera view is rotated 180 degrees relative to the star chart. So you can see this. I can actually flip it in carte to seal. So this little galaxy looks like NGC 6207. This one here, it's a pretty bright core. I wonder if that's just a star in the foreground, or if that's the core of the galaxy, because it looks kind of patchy and irregular. Actually, carte to seal would tell if there was a star there. Yeah, it's a star. I recently added the Gaia data release 2. You can get it for carte to seal, and it's ridiculous. Especially if you look at like a section of the Milky Way and you crank up the number of stars, you don't even need the DSO object windows. You can just see the dark nebula from a lack of stars. But it really stresses the computer out. It doesn't like panning around when there's about 1 million stars displayed. love it. I'm going to save this, but I'm going to clear and restart it just to see if those hot pixels go away now that the camera has reached its target temperature. Otherwise, it might be a problem with my dark frame. It looks decent. But you can really see how quickly the live stack cleans up. You know, within 4 frames, the noise, sort of the first 10 or 12 frames, the noise really plummets as stuff averages out, and then the improvement becomes kind of slower and slower, I think, to the square root of time. We can see what's in the neighborhood. I'm gonna unflip the planetarium just because it bends my brain to look at. Look at M92, which is pretty close by. So this is the old M13 in memory of the live stack, so we'll clear it out, and now it'll start stacking the new one. It's a little bright in the middle. So, oops, I accidentally saved M13 under the wrong name. 92. At least it's iconic enough to recognize. It's always a puzzle when I look at the folder the next morning and see 3 faint, obscure galaxies labeled the same thing. Going,
But they're clearly different.
yeah. But,
There's software for that, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I really wish I could get plate solving to work with SharpCap, but fortunately the mount is pretty accurate. You know, you can see it lands pretty close to center. Even if I had a much smaller field of view, I would still land on frame and not need plate solving. But it'd be really nice for the initial startup to be able to do the auto alignment with plate solving. That'd be pretty cool. Although I've read that some people don't even really do an alignment. They just start a 1-star alignment. The mount goes to the star. They don't even do any alignment whatsoever. They just accept it blindly, and then they plate solve from there. So they'll, you know, tell the mount to go somewhere. Of course, it won't land there because it's way off because it's not aligned. But then they plate solve, get the coordinates, sync the mount to those coordinates, and then iteratively move to the target, and then plate solve again and do that sort of iteration, and they can just hone in on the part or the target they're looking for, and they never do any alignment whatsoever.
Brute force.
Yeah, but it would take a lot longer.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
I'd do the work up front and get the mount to land on it.
I've been pretty happy just having done the polar alignment with the Ioptron, what is it, the Polar
Eye
Master,
polar?
or whatever it's called.
The eye polar?
Uh, Actually, that's not. That's QHYCCD variant.
Oh, okay. I saw Venu in the club got, I think it was the CEM40, the new mount, and it has the integrated polar scope. And I didn't realize it, but I guess they do more than polar alignment with it, where it takes a picture, and because it's integrated into the mount, and the mount has sort of confined its own limits, you can just do a dead rec and go to from there. So as soon as it sees where it is and where the mount is, without doing any alignment, you can just go to stuff, which is pretty cool. I was
Yeah, well, that's
puzzled.
what I've been
I was
doing.
like, you didn't do an
the
alignment? How do you put this?
line. Then just doing a 1-star alignment from there. And it's hard to do it without any kind of alignment, just because you don't necessarily know what the scope's
reflection
flexion is
errors
compared
and
to
stuff.
their axis.
True. I really love the little blue stars in there, the blue stragglers. I assume that's what they are. Try for the Ring Nebula. I'm not sure if it. I think it's clear of the. It should be clear of the trees. So with this wide field scope, we should be able to see the entire constellation. So
which views do your trees end up blocking from your house?
I think all directions below maybe 45-ish. I've got some sort of notches where I can go down to maybe 20 or 30.
Yeah,
I really want to make
a decent
map.
east-west. My southern view is rather dramatically obscured by the biggest oak tree in existence, I swear.
Just wide, broad, and tall.
Yeah.
So this is the old live stack in memory, and if I clear it with, we should be able to. Yep, there we go. Landed on it.
Typically, what I would do if I want to look south is I actually move to my backyard. And my backyard is completely obscured, the trees over it, except I can look over the house to the south a little bit better.
Nice. We've got the central star there too.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, that looks nice. The color.
I love having the color.
Gosh, and you just get that there so fast.
This is 36 seconds, 9 frames of 4 seconds each. Actually, I usually use 8 seconds. Depending how late we run, we'll see if the Dumbbell Nebula comes up, clears the trees. Actually, I have a canned image from last night I could probably pull up.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that one.
I don't want to block the... Yeah, it's so colorful. crazy. Someday I want to try and get the 12-inch f4 working. So this is an 8-inch f4 that I'm running, but last fall I got a really good deal on a unused 12-inch f4, but there's no way in hell that's going to fit on the Vixen Super Polaris, so I gotta sort out a mount for it. I think I might try and make an alt-azimuth with Onstep.
Not with that attitude.
Let's see, pictures. Yeah, so this is the, right now this is the 8-inch on the Vixen Super Polaris. So the little 4-inch I used to use was kind of appropriately sized for the mount. It was a good pairing. But now it's kind of borderline ridiculous. I've got a gym weight from Walmart with a bushing as my counterweight at 25 pounds to offset the scope. I think is 22 pounds, and then plus all the other stuff. It's definitely taxing on the little mount, but seems to handle it like a champ. It lands things on center. And this mount doesn't have a single bearing, a ball bearing in it. It's all plain bearings, precision machine surfaces, greased. Even the worms are just plain bearings. So it gets a lot of friction when you load it up like this, but it seems to do okay. I just hope it doesn't snap off at the altitude adjustment. That'd be a sad day. Can definitely tell it's under
I have a bunch
strain.
of tapered roller bearings if you want any.
What size? Sure.
The big donated pile of mechanical parts that we got.
I would definitely have to check it out. I saw an email. Yeah. I didn't look through. Were there pictures or?
Yeah, we have boxes. There's boxes of tapered roller bearings in there.
Awesome.
All unused, it looks like.
That could be perfect. I've been trying to think up a design for. I think at first I want to build a Dobsonian type base just because it's easy to fabricate for a larger telescope. But eventually I really want to try to make a just a massive equatorial with big cast axes and big tapered roller bearings. So that could be perfect.
I want to move it.
No, yeah, I have to make it in pieces. That's the nice thing with the Super Polaris is with the head mounted to the tripod, I can just grab the whole thing and go. Previously, with the smaller setup, I could actually take the entire thing in one go with scope and counterweight mounted, but with this I have to make 2 trips because it's pretty heavy with all that stuff on there. Ooh, looks like a faint little galaxy right there, kind of propeller shaped. I wonder, hopefully I can accentuate it a little bit. So this is probably going to make the ring look blown out. But I'm looking at this little galaxy right there in the background. And you can see that kind of horizontal streaking to the fixed pattern noise. That's kind of from the natural dithering of my mount's drift as it oscillates in right ascension. Onstep does have a capability to do periodic error correction. So if you build an encoder on the worm so that it has an index mark, then you can use a guide software to capture a periodic error curve and then apply it, and it should smooth that out, which would be pretty cool. I just don't have the encoder on there. And with live stacking,
yeah, that's the one thing.
Really
that's the one thing I splurged on my mount was I got one with a built-in encoder on the right ascension.
Nice. It's something I've always wanted to try. It seems pretty cool. It seems to work really well on the examples I've seen of it used.
That's been great. I've taken like 5-minute exposures on it without guiding, and it's
Awesome.
Point, stars, everything. I don't have very heavy equipment though.
Yeah, always helps. Enhance. Well, you can see a little bit of the interior texture. Very blurry and blocky, but a little bit. And I think there's some enhancement tools where you can do some basic sharpening, but I don't know what that seemed to help. I always tend to overdo it though. So usually I'll adjust it to where I think it looks good, and then I'll reduce that by half or 60%. Because I can, I start to get little black halos around the star because I've sort of overcooked it. I think it made a noticeable difference.
Yeah, it's fun playing with the sharpening filters and registacks when I was doing the solar stuff, just because you could way overdo it.
With the wavelet filtering? Or just the...
Wavelets, yeah.
Another thing I'd like to do is remote focusing, because Onstep has the capability for it. So I can't really tell if this is seeing or focus, but if I did get
a focuser for my unit. I need to hook it up though.
Nice. For the Indy system?
Yeah.
That'll be cool.
I'll be doing some of that with my forced vacation time.
Oh, I've got some of that coming up in July. It seems like they strategically plan the dates to encourage people to take the time in between. My company, they didn't take time adjacent to. We had some forced time off around Memorial Day, and we have some around the 4th of July, but the weeks scheduled aren't continuous with those existing holidays, so there's like weird 4-day weeks in between. So I think it's their plan to make people go, screw it, I'll take all the time off. Wow. There's a purple star. Told you we'd see one. Maybe that's pretty good. I'll save it. Let's see. I'll poke around into Cygnus, but I think it might be high enough. It looks like 45 degrees. Let's see if the dumbbell is above the trees. So here come the trees. Oh yeah, perfect, easy.
I'm hoping we'll be able to use the field in July or August maybe, just because I want to be able to work on the Observers Challenge, and all the stuff for later this summer is in the Milky Way. So got the lagoon. I think the lagoon. And
okay. You need the horizons.
Trifid, I think.
I have a good site near me. It's a big athletic field, but it's It's a lot nicer to just run from the driveway. But that place has really good horizons. There's just nothing around, no facilities, no internet. So usually I'll just capture this stuff and bring it back.
I just want to find a place where I won't get chased off by cops.
Yeah, I've ran into a lot of cops there. Around 2 in the morning they do a patrol, but they seem all right with the telescope stuff, which is nice. The only problem is people use it mostly as a dog park, so you gotta watch out for dog bombs when you're trudging around in the dark.
I hate that.
So the dumbbell's definitely there. And if I...
Yeah, July is M8
apply
Lagoon
the stretch, we
Nebula,
can see.
and August is M20 Trifid Nebula.
Nice. I was able to get the lagoon last night. Actually, here you can see, this is the finder view to the south. So I've got this one little notch. So it just happened at just the right time. I was able to get the Trifid and the lagoon last night. But I'll have to... My telescope's in a slightly different position tonight, so I'm not sure when it'll transit through that notch. But you can see the southern horizon's not ideal for me either. A lot of the planetary stuff, I have to go to that field if I want to see things rising or setting or comets or... So these are the individual frames.
I was chatting with Evan up the street. He said they're going to phase 2, so we might be able to access the fields in another couple of weeks or so. We'll see.
Awesome.
Great. Assume just the fields though, right?
I'd be real surprised if they'll let us access the house and all the facilities. But, you know, if everyone's distancing, they might be okay. But we'll see. I have to talk to him this week. I haven't talked in a couple weeks to him.
At least the pads will help, you know, clearly marked, very widely spaced. It's just we'll have to crack down on the view sharing.
We have to find a place to put automated.
Yeah. That automated scope is incredible. That's going to be so cool. When
We had a group of us had a meeting last night where we talked about the implementation installation. It was a good discussion. It's just going to take a little money.
Yeah. Got the,
Well, I'm sure we could figure that out.
yeah. Got the dumbbell here. You can see sort of the little faint ears extending out of it. And definitely some hydrogen alpha splotchy texture in there. And the right now the scope is just unfiltered RGB with no infrared cut. And I think my sky's around Bortel 5-ish.
Yeah, I usually judge the clubhouse as like 6 or 5.
Maynard's in kind of a nice little local minimum between Boston and Worcester. It's about as dark as it gets between the two. And it's right next to the ASI294 Wildlife Refuge, which is good help. Big wetlands with no development. And a river cutting through. So,
That's with the mosquitoes too, though.
yeah, so it's nice to have the remote scope. You just gotta wade through the mosquitoes during the setup.
Where I am, I'm somewhere around a 7 or 6 Bortel.
Oh wow.
Last night I pegged the Nelm at around 4.5. I think some nights I think I can just barely eke out a 5 with averted vision if I stare really, carefully in the right spots.
That's rough. Yeah, I think Doug Paul is also in the city, so a lot of his images that he's pulling out is pretty good.
Yeah.
To pull that out of the really, really bright skies around Boston.
Yeah, I think he shoots somewhere slightly fainter than I. I think he's more of a. He's probably at the portal 6.
It's still pretty
Still
rough.
can't get over when I was actually in Boston proper trying to help somebody with a telescope. That was crazy.
Oh.
Trying to find a North Star. It was way too hard to find it.
Yeah. The where I've been setting up my telescope, it's not a guaranteed view of the North Star for me. So I've been trying to practice using the compass and bubble level technique. But tonight I lucked out and I was able to use SharpCap's polar alignment. But especially since it gets dark so late and so slowly, I gotta get better at the compass technique or build an alt-az. But I imagine in Boston you almost have to sort of dead reckon hip fire.
I guessed which way was north, and I managed to. I saw looked up which building was directly north of us on the map. I looked at that building and then very carefully looked upward from that building to find the North Star.
Yeah, and the city's not like modern layout. You can't guarantee north-south run of the blocks and anywhere. It's not like Chicago or New York.
The problem was that the guy had the reflex finder on his. He had like a Nexstar 6 or 4 or 6. He had the reflex finder on it backwards.
Oh, that doesn't help.
So I flipped it around and tried to fix it, but it had been damaged from putting it on backwards, and so we discussed how to fix that. In order to get it aligned, I was trying to point at anything that I could find in the scope because since the reflex finder was completely useless.
Way off.
So I was trying to locate something in the F10 scope so that I could then use the actual the center of the reflex finder.
I'm gonna go to the coat hanger. I think it's a little too big to. Maybe it'll just. I might be missing 1 star. But it should definitely pop up in the finder. I can momentarily hide the crosshairs. There we go. A little coat hanger. I think. Let me just figure out which way I want to nudge. I want to nudge south by 30. Yeah, overshot. Little too big. I think I don't quite have all the sort of bottom bar stars in there. You can definitely see some color variation in them, which is nice. The sort of live frames off the cameras, those don't get color balanced, or you can color balance them, but it ends up messing with the calibration frames, or all of your calibration frames have to have the same color balance. So I just leave everything at 50-50, and then I only color balance using the live stack because it's kind of non-destructive alteration. It doesn't mess with any of the calibration frames.
Yeah.
Someday I might figure out a good color balance number and then redo my calibration for it, just so that the live view is not green, but for now I'll live with it. Let's go for the crescent. Oh, not sure if it'll be above the trees or not. Getting closer. So you can see part of Cygnus, which is nice. I really like having previously I used a 25mm focal length little CMount CCD camera, or what is it? Closed caption TV security camera lenses. And that gave like a 10-degree field of view. It was very similar to like a 7x50 binocular. It was nice. But I recently moved to an 8mm sort of wider field of view. And I've been really enjoying that one just because you can see, you know, chunks of constellation, and you get more of a warning when you're going to hit a tree. Let's see, SharpCap. Okay, I think I just barely make out the crescent there, and we can stretch the individual frames to make sure it looks like it's well framed. So I will remember to unstretch the individual frame before starting a live stack, and we'll clear out the old dumbbell data. I think the veil would probably be in the trees. Oh, maybe not. I always forget the... It should be clear. Oh, dang it. I accidentally moved the crosshair. The mount's been pretty good, so I'm not too concerned, but I still like to have it. So I'll probably go to a bright star and sync it up. Yeah, the crescent looks good. I wonder if these sort of pale areas, I wonder if that's partial reflection or is that other composition? I wonder. Because there's some areas that definitely aren't as red as the others.
Well, there could be some other elements in there.
Like a sulfur or oxygen. Or always forget, is the sulfur is close to hydrogen as far as being pretty close to red, and oxygen's kind of blue-green, or is it the other way around? Like when people do the narrowband and the false color, because with the normal Bayer filter, I know two of the elements kind of blend together and just kind of a shade of red-pink without a narrowband to separate them.
Well, there's a lot of interesting stuff in the blue-green area, so...
I give the part of the veil a try. Talking about blue and green colors, we'll get there. That looks like
the S2 is slightly longer wavelength than hydrogen alpha.
Okay. So they
hydrogen
probably...
beta is slightly shorter wavelength than oxygen 3.
Oh. So they H beta and oxygen kind of in the blue-green area together. Hard to differentiate without narrowband.
Yeah, O3 is right in the green-blue transition. Part of why oxygen is kind of what we notice most when we're doing visual stuff, is just because it's right smack in the rod's reception area.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
But that's why the hydrogen beta filter actually works for visual use. It's slightly bluer, but it still reacts to our rods. Their rods still react to it. Because of the combination of hydrogen alpha and hydrogen beta in the same locations, kind of why do you get that purplish hue for those regions in photography. Some of the narrowband imagers, often when they do RGB plus hydrogen alpha, intentionally make the hydrogen alpha kind of a slightly purpley color.
Just to pop it out.
Yeah.
There's Deneb. Actually, I wonder. Let's see. Yeah, it's probably in the trees too. Let's see if we can get Alberio and the colors show up. Still a little blown out. Actually, I'll probably just drop the gain. I don't know how SharpCap will react to trying to stack 10 millisecond frames at 4K.
I'm probably going to sign off shortly.
Yeah. It's work night. That's the trouble. It gets dark so late and the weather's so patchy that gotta try to make use of the work nights, but gotta get up tomorrow. Well, thanks for stopping by and joining the voice chat. I'm sure it makes for a lot more engaging viewing for other people too, instead of me just droning on about stuff.
Have to get more, convince more people to not be shy and join on in voice.
And if anyone listening in wants to talk, or if you have any questions about EAA, I'd be glad to discuss it and show examples and anything like that. Maybe I'll wrap up not too far along, because last night I stayed out till 2:30, so I'm on a little bit of sleep deprivation, so we'll see. Yeah, poke around to the south and see how things are positioned relative to the trees and that little tiny notch that I have. Yeah, it looks pretty squarely in the trees. So. here's that notch that I was talking about. I've got kind of a very slender window to the south between my neighbor's trees. So using this wide field finder, I can kind of try and select something that might fall in there. So if I, right now the view is flipped by 180 degrees, so I can flip the view in the planetarium, and then the large rectangle represents the approximate field of view of the finder. So looking at the picture, I know if I look for something that's kind of to the left of where the scope is currently pointing, I hopefully will find something that's in that clear spot. Looks like the mount's doing a meridian flip. So I have my on-step mount set up to, it takes, I think, 7 degrees on either side of the meridian. So I can sort of push it past, but if I tell it to go to something 8 degrees away, it'll automatically do a meridian flip to get there. And you can see the sort of scope location tracked in the planetarium too. And now that we did a meridian flip, the camera is the right way around. You can see the trees come from the bottom of the frame. So I can unflip the planetarium. So now we're kind of looking for things on the west side of the meridian. Let's see if the Virgo cluster is still above the trees. I've also got some pretty high trees to the west. Maybe we can look for the relativistic jet coming out of M87. Although I'm not sure if my focus is pretty... Yeah, there's my neighbor's floodlight. Oh no, that's my street light. I'll give it a shot. We'll see how much glare there is from that street light. So previously I was messing around with Alberio and had the gain turned way down. So I've got 8 seconds and 420 gain, and that should match my dark frame that I had. So you definitely have something in frame, which is good. So let's start live stacking and see if that'll help clear it up. I think I maybe see a little bit of elongation in the nucleus, sort of that kind of 2 o'clock. And I have to double check, but I think that might be, hopefully that's the relativistic jet. That'd be pretty cool. Oof. Oh, I did it again. I don't know. It seems to be moving around on the histogram as the new frames come in. So I think we can see it right there. So I'm zoomed in on the nucleus of M87, and you can definitely see that there's a sort of protrusion jutting out in this direction. And I think that's the relativistic jet. I'm going to quickly pull up a reference image to check. Got a lot of pictures of the jet, but they're very sort of tightly cropped, so there's no reference stars to go off of. I'm trying to find one that's usable. I think I've got a good one. So that is definitely the relativistic jet coming out of the black hole. I don't know if I can hold this on top or not. So here's an A-pod, and if we zoom in, it's a little hard because this one is stretched to show sort of the faint extension of the galaxy, but if you look at the center, there's a bright streak coming out. And what I'm using is looking at these two smaller galaxies that are nearby. This picture is almost kind of rotated 90 degrees clockwise to my orientation. But if we go back here, we've got those two faint galaxies, and I can push the midpoint to show those again. So here are those two, and then there's the jet coming out right there. But I think the jet is a little easier to see with the midpoint pushed off in this direction, just because it sort of accentuates the difference in bright objects, which at the very center of this sort of nucleus, the core, it's pretty bright, so it's a better use case. Although you lose all the nice faint extension. This is something I'm really excited to try with the 12-inch if I ever get it working, just to have a little more image scale to push it. Although right now I think my sampling is like 1.1 arc second, which is usually, usually our seeing isn't that good around here. So using the bigger scope would probably only benefit on exceptional seeing nights. I'm pretty happy with the sort of field of view sampling and physical size of the 8-inch f4. It's getting closer to that tree. You can see in Carte de Ciel, you can add on a bunch of catalogs for really faint galaxies. And you can see how just insane it is, especially around these big superclusters. Looks like a satellite in the wide field. Gonna go for M106. Actually, maybe M63. I don't know if I've looked at that one with the new camera and telescope setup. Didn't like that. I think I tried to issue a slew before it had completed the previous one. And also that's in a tree, so not very... So I'm gonna clear the stack. Looks like the telescope is still settling down, a little bit of jitter. So I'm gonna probably end up clearing it again. Also a satellite. Let's check the... Yep, just very faint little dot, not as bright as the other ones we've seen. But you can see it kind of exiting the frame. Oh, looks like it flared up. It probably just came out of Earth's shadow? No, it's probably a little late for that. Maybe it's high orbit. Well, that was pretty cool. Just flared up. We'll have to look into that. Wonder where Earth's shadow is at this time and this time of the year compared to where we're looking. Pretty sure there's pages where you can look that up. So I'm gonna clear the live stack and we'll start stacking M63. And And hopefully we can resolve that wonderful texture around the sort of inner area of this galaxy. As the noise dies down, it hopefully will become more apparent. I think that makes it too bright. Might look better with sort of less midpoint or less aggressive, just so that the that kind of subtle texture doesn't get blown out in the brightness. It looks like a couple faint background galaxies are out there too. I'll see if I can look those up in Cartesial. Really wish it had distances. But you can definitely start to see the texture. Just how kind of patchy and splotchy it is, and all the sort of knots of dust and how they're illuminated. It gives a very, very 3D effect, where kind of all of the material in the foreground is backlit and rimlit, and then all of the material in the background is sort of illuminated by the core. Really gives a 3D effect. It's at 4 minutes, 16 seconds. It's looking pretty good. The noise is starting to come down, and more of the sort of delicate detail on the outer area is starting to show. I'm gonna poke around at some galaxies I'm not sure if I've looked at before. Ooh, looks like a nice edge on. So this is NGC 5906. Looks like it's in Draco. So this is the old M63 still in memory of the live stack, so we'll clear that out. Now this is the NGC 5906, pretty sure. Let me just double check the name. Yep. So it has a nice dust lane cutting through. And just looking for little small background galaxies. Usually there's always a couple. Looks like there's one right there. I can verify and correct a seal. Looks like that one's PGC 54577. I was hoping to find a distance on it. No luck. And we'll see what's next door. Looks like this is also an edge on with a very thin dust lane, but fairly good contrast. Wonder how well this one would show up in visual, just because it seems like it's fairly well defined, even though it's pretty small. This is NGC 5866. It's almost like a planet Saturn galaxy. Oh, satellite. I think that one's probably in the house, but I'll give it a shot. Yeah, it's in the trees. I bet the veil is risen above the trees to the east, so maybe we'll give that a shot. Let's see what shows up. Yeah, I think I can see something there, so we'll stretch the individual frame. We can definitely see it's there. So I've got 8-second exposures, so I'll start the live stack, clear out the old picture, and remember to stop the display stretch. Oh, I wonder if the lagoon is in the that little notch in the trees that I have to the south. You can definitely see the veil, both the sort of blue-green and the red. No luck. Let's try for the middle area of the veil. Yeah, I think we've definitely got something there. I'm gonna do a little experiment. Change the type of flat that I'm using. When I first set up the telescope, I took and SharpCap it as a tool to capture the flats, and it has an option to capture with bias and without bias. So I want to try to use the one with bias, I think, just to see. So I'm going to start the live stack, clear out the old info, prevent the double stretch. You can definitely see there's very faintly something there. is very, very low surface brightness. I bet a UHC filter would really help. Although I've only played with the UHC filter a couple times, and I find I get some kind of internal reflection, or all of the light that it rejects, you know, it gets bounced back toward the primary mirror and then bounced back towards the camera again as a slightly defocused area. So I get these little halos around some of the very bright stars, but not the majority. Still need to play around with it a lot. I'm looking forward to this summer with all the emission nebula. Maybe I'll get to play with the UHC filter. Haven't quite decided if it helps or doesn't help. At least for EAA, with the goal of using very short sub-exposures, the amount of light that it cuts can be, you know, not ideal for taking short exposure. But at least with the German equatorial, I can push the exposure a little longer. I think the longest I've gone is 32 seconds, which I probably have noticeable tracking error, but 16 seconds seems doable. So usually when I play around with the filter, I try 8 seconds versus 16 seconds, and haven't really conclusively found it to be better or worse, but I haven't really tried it a lot. But I think something like this would be a good use case for it, where it's just barely visible, very, very dim. Maybe I can try to accentuate it with a little more aggressive stretch. I want to try a section of the North American Nebula. I think the kind of Gulf of Mexico area is one of the brighter, more detailed areas. I definitely see something. So I'll crank it up to 8 seconds, stop the double stretch, clear out the old data, and start stacking on the North American Nebula. Definitely something, definitely framed. So in areas like this that have, you know, a dark nebula or a very dense opaque area, I find it especially helpful to not push the black point too hard, because you end up losing a lot of the subtle sort of depth of that massive opaque cloud. If you push it too far, it just becomes a black hole with no detail. Whereas if you back off, you can sort of see brighter or thinner areas and darker, thicker areas and knots and texture to it. Yeah, I like that little area right there. Looks like maybe more of a reflection nebula. Hard to tell. I bet a infrared image of this area would be pretty cool. All the protostars. It's really cleaning up nice. There's a really cool Herbig Harrow object in the Pelican. I've been trying to get a picture of it. I tried last night, but no luck. Or debatable. So here's a picture from last night. This is very close to this, but maybe a couple fields of view away. But this is kind of the head of the Pelican right next to the North American Nebula. And there's its eye, sort of top of the head, the beak. I think this is upside down from sort of the normally portrayed orientation. But right along this brightest wall, there's this slender little dark stalk. And at the very tip of that stalk, if my camera were to pick it up, there's sort of a bright line that runs through it perpendicular, and that's sort of the bow shock of material being jettisoned out of a protostar forming inside that molecular cloud. And I know that it's in this exact sort of this precise location. If I look at reference pictures, I see these two stars, and that wave sort of runs right here. And if I kind of zoom out, squint, and imagine, I can maybe just detect some brightness, but I think it's at the resolution limit of the Bayer filter. Ideally, this I think would be done with monochrome with narrowband, but maybe the 12-inch, if I ever get it working, that might show it, hopefully. But this is looking really nice. Yeah, one last object and I think I'll wrap it up. Yeah, I think maybe we'll have to check out the bubble nebula first. I think that'll be a good end of the night object. Might try to adjust the framing to get M52 as well. Or not. It's behind the house. Oh well. Well, thanks to all that tuned in. Have a good night. Keep looking up.